Let's implement our movie API. Now you may notice that the movie entity has no reference to an user ID. And if we think about it, our application is designed for a single user only because you can't filter, you can't assign movies to users. And this watched boolean indicates that the movie should be assigned to a single user only, just to keep this in mind. Okay, let's go create the movie API using FastAPI. I will create a new Python file in handlers, api.handlers, and call it movie, or we can do movie v1. Right, we need a router, API router, and we can use versioning, path versioning API v1 movie. All right, looks good enough. And now we need to create handlers according to our CRUD operations from the repository. So we need to create the create handler to create a movie or insert it into the database. So let's do create movie. Create movie creates a movie, and we will annotate it with router post for creation. The path should be /, and in order to make this API conform to the RESTful standards, we need to be careful when using paths and naming these route entities. Yeah, we want movies for the plural. Okay, we post to API v1 movies, creates a movie, and then the response code or status code of this endpoint should be 201. 201 means HTTP status created. If you don't want to hard code numbers, you can also import HTTP status and use the typed enum, which is created. 201 created means document created, URL follows. But this is actually a tuple. We need actually to select the first element. Well, I'll just keep it 201. There is an enum which only contains the status codes in Python, but I forgot its name at the moment. So post on /status code create, and let's see what do we want to return back to the user. So we give in the movie ID, but we will not let the user generate the movie ID. So since we don't have any method in our movie repository, get all movies, we will implement it in a later stage, we should return the movie ID to the user because the user will need the ID in order to call get by ID. Okay, so we have status code. Let's create a response class movie created response base model for this. Oops. Base model, import this from Pydantic, and we'll respond with movie ID string. Okay. Let's move this into the responses, make a new file, movie, save it there, and I'm gonna move this to movie.py in responses. Import the model, ensure new line at the end of the file, and the response model is movie created response. Okay, now let's return a dummy movie created response, and I want to say movie ID equal dummy. Yeah, we have a movie ID. Before running this, we need to register the router in create app from API, api.py. We need to include the router for the movie API. So I'm gonna say movie v1, import movie v1, and app.include router movie v1.router. If I run this and open up the Swagger endpoint, we can perhaps comment out the demo router in order to declutter this endpoint. We have movies. Let's try it out, execute, and we get 201 with movie ID dummy. Okay, looks good enough. Let's improve this by modifying movie v1 and adding tags movie here. So for movies, by adding tags, Swagger will replace this default string here with movies, and now we have a simpler API. Good. Before implementing create, let's see what do we need. So in order to create a movie, we need a movie repository. If I'm not mistaken, we can just use Mongo movie repository, and we can say repo Mongo movie repository, import this, and we can pass it the connection string to localhost MongoDB // localhost 27017, and then we make this method async in order to do await repo dot create, and here we will pass movie. Okay, the create function does not return anything. It will just create a movie. Now we need to grab the movie body, and we shall grab it from the user. In order to grab the movie body, I'm gonna create a new Python module and call it DTO, which stands for data transfer objects. Gonna create a new Python file in DTO, call it movie, and we name this class create movie body. Let's see base model from Pydantic, inherit from base model, and we need the same things we use in our model entity for movie, and that's it. Title, description, release year, and watched. We don't let the user provide the movie ID field. Okay, so let's add a comment, create movie body is used as the body for the create movie endpoint. Then close unmodified tabs. Movie v1, we take in movie of type create movie body, import this, and then we can optionally specify that this is a body. We get this from the body, and make this field required by passing in the ellipsis operator, give it a title movie, and description the movie details. All right. And then we can use a static method on our movie entity in order to convert this DTO to a movie, but I'm not sure if it works. Let's see. Going to import movie, and then we can do implement a new method, static method, def from movie DTO, which then we need to rename this to, actually let's just use the constructor because it will just complicate things. The constructor, we need a movie ID, title, description, release year, and watched. We already have most of this information if we pass movie ID of none for the moment. Title, movie dot title, description, movie dot description, release year, movie dot release year, and watched, movie dot watched. And the movie ID is none. Let's generate the movie ID, and for that we can use an uniform unique identifier. We can use the UID Python package, import it, then we can choose one of these algorithms in order to generate the UID. And I'm going to use UUID4, which stands for a random unique object. Never mind, a random UID. Okay, so movie ID equals to this, and we convert it to string. And if you want, you can also use UID3, which creates a UID from the MD5 hash of a namespace and a name if you want to make the UID to be predictable. Otherwise, you can use UID4 to generate a random UID. Okay, so we have movie ID equals to movie ID, and we need to return the movie ID to the user. And if we do so, we will return a movie created response. Let's run this, stop and run, go back to our Swagger endpoint, and as we can see, we can try this out, execute, and we got a movie ID. If we check the database, do a docker exec it movie tracker mongo1 mongo. Whoops, the container name has changed. So let's copy this. Docker exec. Use the correct container name mongo movie tracker database, mongo shell, show databases, use movie track db, show collections, db.movies.find.pretty. We get the newly inserted movie. Looks like this is working. Now let's see, let's add some validations to this create movie body. To validate create movie body, we're gonna use validators from Pydantic. And if we open Pydantic docs by typing on Google Pydantic docs, we can see that we have usage and validators. Open up validators, and in order to create a validator, it is pretty easy. We need a function for our validator, and then we decorate the function with validator, type in the name of the field which we're gonna validate, and if the field is valid, we return the value for the field. If the field is not valid, we'll return a validation or value error. Okay, let's do that. Let's validate the title, minimum title length greater than 3, and I'm gonna do it like this: self v validate import validate from Pydantic. Actually, it's validator, my bad. Import validator from Pydantic validator, pass in the name of the field, and if you look closely, Pydantic is not using self here, it uses class, which means that this function is not an instance function, is actually a class function, which is, if you're coming from a other programming languages background, is sort of a combination between instance and a static method. But let's ignore that and just roll with it. Okay, so we have a class, a v, and then if we want to validate if title is greater than 3 characters, so if length of v is less than 4 characters, we can raise a value error and say that title's length must be greater than 3 characters. All right, and if it is greater, we just return v. Let's test this validator, stop the application, run it again, go back to Swagger, and if I say title AA, you can see the API responded with code 422, which is a client error, and it means error unprocessable entity. We get a detail, location body, title, and a message. Title's length must be greater than 3 characters, value error. Nice. Let's do that with description as well. Just gonna copy paste it, use description here, then description length greater than 3. We get the value of the description, replace the message, and we're done. Let's validate the release year. We want release year to be greater than 90,000. Release year or I'm just picking a random number here. Class value decorated with validator, give the field name, and if release year less than 19,000, then we'll raise value error with we use v, value error with release year must be greater than 19,000. If we test this, we can run it and it will complain. Now it complains about the title and the release year. It must be greater than 19,000. Okay, so we've completely validated the create movie body. And now what we need to handle is, before moving on is this thing here. If you see, this is hard coded, which means if we're gonna unit test this create movie endpoint, we need to use a real database. But we want to avoid to use a real database because we have already implemented movie repository using an in-memory database, which we built from scratch. It's simple, but it does the job. So in order to override this dependency, I am gonna use FastAPI's dependency injection. And how this works, I will create a new function, def movie repository, and then I'm just gonna make it return this with and then I want to say repo and give it the type of the abstract repository, movie repository, import it from our abstractions, equals to depends from FastAPI, import it, and in depends we're gonna pass the dependency movie repository, and then I will say that actually I'm just gonna delete this. We already get the repo, and then we can just format the code by running black dot, and the code will be formatted and looks good. Let's debug this to ensure we get what we want it to be. And if I run create movie endpoint, but I need to modify the release here in order to pass the validation we just made, we see that repo is actually an API repository, movie Mongo repository, which is great. The movie has been successfully created. The next problem we need to solve is this hard-coded string value. What happens if we want to use another MongoDB instance, which is not on localhost? Well, we can't because we have hard-coded this value. We also hard-coded the database. So in order to change this, Mongo movie repository, we need to implement a settings module. Luckily, FastAPI already does the work for us, and we can just use FastAPI settings, and here we see settings and environment variables. Yeah, all we need is a settings file which inherits from with a class settings that inherits from Pydantic base settings. So let's do that. Let's create an API, new Python file, settings.py, and have a class settings. And here I'm gonna inherit from base settings, and then I'm gonna pass. Let's see. The only configurable things we have right now is connection string and database. So we can just say Mongo connection string is a string and Mongo database name as also a string. And we can add a comment here, MongoDB settings, in order to make a differentiation between separate settings. Okay, so if we look closely, there's no code example here that uses field, but if we search for field, we get this field data type, and we can use it in order to implement validations for our settings. So let's use field and import this Pydantic field, And then I'm gonna use the default value, which is also used in the mongo.py repository, this one for localhost. If we don't override this using environment variables, the default value will be this connection string. Then we can give it a title, MongoDB connection string, give it a description, the connection string. Actually, let's give it a description. The connection string for the MongoDB database. Format code real quick using black, and then I'll give it an env. Using env will make it so we can name this environment variable. So I want MongoDB connection string. If we use multiple databases in our applications, we can give it a more specific name like MongoDB movie connection string. Okay, let's add another field equal to field, and here we need to pass in the one moment Mongo movie track DB. That's the default value of our database. MongoDB movies database name. Let's update this, and the database name for the MongoDB movies database. All right, and here I'm gonna use MongoDB database name. Okay, this is good enough. Let's go back to the FastAPI documentation, and if we scroll down, we can see settings in the dependency, and we can use settings in our endpoint as a dependency. But this is a bit maybe too much. We can also use it as a singleton. It's up to you how to implement this. I'm gonna just use the dependency. So I'm gonna say settings, give it the type of settings, import base settings, and I'm gonna say depends settings. Okay, let's say def settings, return new settings, which is just settings in Python, and that's about it. We actually have to move this into our movie repository and move this up a bit. So movie repository depends on settings. Let's just use settings dependency or settings instance. Gets confusing real quick. We can use a least recently used cache in order to avoid constructing this class when we call it multiple times. Otherwise, the code each time you call the endpoint will construct the settings instance and read environment variables. We don't want this. We want to reuse the instance, and we can do it by annotating it with or decorating it with least recently used cache. And now that we have the settings, we can say Mongo repository, give it a connection string, settings dot Mongo connection string, and the database settings dot Mongo database name. You can also format this code. Looks decent. Let's debug it to see if it still works. Seems okay. It ran. Now if we execute create, can see that we get a repo, and the repo has the correct connection string, which means that our code works. And we can also test that the least recently used cached works by setting a breakpoint here, debug this. Wait, not here. Here, debug this, and if we run it, you see that the breakpoint hits, meaning it hit once. Let's continue. If we run a second time, the breakpoint didn't hit. The least recently used cache decorator cached this settings instance, and instead of calling this function again, it just returned the settings instance. And we can also use least recently used cache in order to cache the movie repository, because we want the database to be as a singleton. We don't want to open a new database connection every time we call this endpoint. Okay, looks good. One more thing, I want to add some comments here that movie repository fast API dependency and settings instance fast API dependency. And that's it. That's our create movie endpoint. We can of course improve this in the future, but we will also do complete unit testing of this endpoint.